Hollywood sold Rock Hudson as the man women could trust, want, and bring home in their imagination. The bachelor, the gentleman, the clean leading man. But that version of Rock Hudson did not survive by accident. Who shaped the public life? Who softened the rumors? Who made sure the parts that did not fit the fantasy never reached the audience? The system behind him did more than protect a career. It kept a man separated from his own truth, because the truth could damage the brand. So the question is not what Rock Hudson kept private. It is who needed the real Rock Hudson out of sight. You're watching Hollywood Dark Secrets, where the studio image ends and the system behind it finally comes into focus. Before Rock Hudson became the face on posters, he was Roy Harold Scherer Jr., later known for a time as Roy Fitzgerald. He was born in Winnetka, Illinois, into a life that did not look like the one Hollywood would later sell. His father left when he was young. His mother remarried. And after that, Roy took the surname Fitzgerald from his stepfather. There was nothing polished or inevitable about the boy at the center of this story. He was tall, quiet, and unsure of himself. He was not born with the kind of confidence people later attached to the name Rock Hudson. That confidence had to be built. And in Hollywood, when something is built for public use, the person inside the structure often loses space to breathe. After serving in the Navy during the Second World War, Roy Fitzgerald went to California. Like thousands of young men and women, he wanted the screen to open for him. But wanting to act did not mean he knew how to act. Early stories about his first attempts in front of the camera are almost painful to hear. The most famous version says he needed dozens of takes just to deliver one simple line. Directors did not look at him and see a trained artist. They saw a man who could barely get through a basic scene, but the studio system had a different kind of eye. It did not only look for skill, it looked for market value. Roy Fitzgerald had height. He had shoulders. He had a face that could hold light. He had the frame of a man the public could be taught to want. That was enough to keep him in the room. Old Hollywood did not need every star to arrive finished. It needed something it could package. A voice could be trained. A walk could be corrected. A name could be replaced. A past could be hidden. A personality could be pressed into shape until it fit the poster. Roy Fitzgerald was not yet Rock Hudson, but to the men who knew how to sell beauty, he looked like raw material. That phrase sounds cold because the process was cold. The studio did not begin with the question of who he was. It began with the question of what he could become for them. Then Henry Wilson entered his life. Wilson was one of the most important talent agents in the old Hollywood machine. He had a sharp eye for handsome young men, and he understood something the studios understood too. Male beauty could be sold, but only if it came wrapped in the right story. The public could desire a man, but it had to feel safe doing so. Women in the audience had to imagine him as possible. Men in the audience had to accept him as masculine. Gossip columnists had to be fed enough material to keep them useful, but not enough to destroy the product. Wilson knew that a star was not only made on a set. A star was made in contracts, photographs, planted stories, controlled dates, and the careful removal of anything that made the fantasy unstable. The first thing to go was the name. Roy Fitzgerald became Rock Hudson. The new name sounded firm, simple, and easy to print on a poster. It reportedly drew from the Rock of Gibraltar and the Hudson River, giving him a name that felt large before the audience even knew him. It was not subtle. It was designed to be remembered. It gave the public a man who sounded already larger than life. Roy Fitzgerald sounded like someone who could disappear into a crowd. Rock Hudson sounded like someone who could fill a movie screen before saying a word. That was the point. The name was not chosen to honor the person. It was chosen to sell the image. A name change can look small from the outside. In Hollywood, it was never small. A name told the audience how to read a person. It cleaned up class, background, ethnicity, awkwardness, and weakness. It gave the studio a fresh label to print, protect, and own. Once Roy became Rock, he was no longer simply a young man trying to act. He was a product in development. And from that moment on, any part of Roy that did not help Rock could be treated as a problem. After the name, everything around him had to match it. The voice, the walk, the clothes, the dates, the public smile. Rock Hudson had to sound like the man his body promised. Accounts about Henry Wilson describe pressure on Hudson to lower and roughen his voice. Some versions are dramatic, with stories of shouting exercises and damage. The safest truth is still ugly enough. His natural presentation was not considered enough. He had to be adjusted. The voice had to become deeper. The posture had to become stronger. The smile had to look easy. The man had to seem relaxed inside a role that was never relaxed for him. The studio wanted a certain kind of masculinity. Not messy, not uncertain, not complicated, clean, tall, controlled, romantic. A man who could stand beside a woman and make the audience believe the ending before the story even reached it. Rock Hudson became that man on screen because many people worked to make sure the public never saw the strain behind the construction. That strain had a private center. Hudson was gay in an industry and a country that would not allow a leading man to be openly gay and remain the same kind of commercial star. Inside certain Hollywood circles, his sexuality was known or strongly suspected. It was part of the old whisper network. People knew or thought they knew, and they also knew the rules. The truth could not touch the front page. It could not touch the poster. It could not touch the romantic fantasy being sold to women across America. The studio did not treat his private life as private. It treated it as a risk file. This was the 1950s. America was not gentle toward people who did not fit the approved public model. The Lavender Scare had made gay lives vulnerable to suspicion, firing, surveillance, and public ruin. A rumor could cost a person work. A printed accusation could make a career collapse. A leading man like Rock Hudson existed inside that pressure every day. He could be famous, wealthy, desired, and still not free to tell the truth about the person he loved. That is the trap many people miss. Fame did not protect him from fear. Fame gave the fear a larger stage. By the mid-1950s, Rock Hudson had become valuable. He was not only another face in a studio stable, he was rising fast. His body, his voice, his name, and his controlled public life had begun to work exactly as designed. Then Giant arrived. Released in 1956, the film placed him beside Elizabeth Taylor and James Dean and proved he could hold serious screen weight. He earned an Academy Award nomination. He was no longer just handsome. He was prestige. He was box office. He was a major studio investment. That made the private truth even more dangerous to the people around him. A rumor about a struggling actor is gossip. A rumor about a major studio asset is a financial threat. Rock Hudson had become a man whose image supported jobs, contracts, release plans, publicity campaigns, and profits. That meant the people around him had a strong reason to keep the official version intact. They could call it protection, but it was not protection in the human sense. It was protection of the investment. The person could suffer as long as the investment stayed clean. The first major public danger came from Confidential magazine. Confidential was not a normal fan magazine. It fed on scandal. It understood the market for hidden lives. It knew readers wanted the dirty version behind the polished studio photograph. In the mid-1950s, the magazine reportedly threatened to expose Hudson's private life. For Universal and Henry Wilson, that was not a small problem. It was a direct hit aimed at one of the most profitable male images in Hollywood. According to later accounts, Wilson helped stop the Hudson story by offering the magazine other material. The names most often connected to that trade are Rory Calhoun and Tab Hunter. Calhoun's past legal trouble and Hunter's earlier arrest became part of the story. The exact mechanics have been debated, but the pattern is clear enough. Hollywood did not remove the appetite for scandal. It fed that appetite with different bodies. It protected the more valuable image by exposing people considered easier to spend. That moment tells you almost everything about the system. It did not ask what was true, fair, or decent. It asked what would cost less. If Rock Hudson was too profitable to lose, then someone else could absorb the damage. The machine did not save people. It moved danger around until the money was safer. But one tabloid threat was not the end. It only proved how fragile the image was. A handsome, unmarried leading man in his 30s could not remain unexplained forever. The rumors did not need proof to become dangerous. In old Hollywood, suspicion alone could create a problem. So the system reached for an old answer. Put a woman beside him and call it romance. In 1955, Rock Hudson married Phyllis Gates. She had worked as Henry Wilson's secretary. The public got the image it needed. A star had found a wife. Newspapers had photographs. Fans had reassurance. The studio had a visible answer to invisible rumors. But the marriage is one of the most complicated parts of the Hudson story because it cannot be reduced without losing the human damage. Some accounts describe it as a managed cover designed to protect Hudson's career. Gates later disputed the idea that she was simply a willing prop and said she believed the marriage was real from her side. That matters. If she was used, she was not just a plot device. She was a person pulled into a story built to protect another person's image. And if Hudson entered the marriage under pressure, he was also trapped inside a structure that could hurt both of them. That is how these Hollywood arrangements worked at their worst. They did not only distort the star, they pulled other people into the distortion. A woman could become proof. A wife could become evidence. A wedding could become a public relations wall. The studio did not need the marriage to be emotionally true. It needed it to photograph correctly. The marriage lasted about 3 years. Behind the public image, the relationship fell apart. There were arguments, recordings, accusations, and legal pressure. The clean poster could not hold the private strain. The system had tried to solve a lie by adding more people to it. That rarely creates peace. It creates paperwork, resentment, and silence. After the divorce, Hudson's public image survived. That was the point. The man remained intact in the eyes of the audience. He kept working. The leaden man stayed clean. The private wreckage stayed mostly behind doors. But survival came with a daily cost. Love could not be simple. A date could become evidence. A visitor could become danger. A friendship could become a headline. Hudson had to live as if his own front door were part of a studio security plan. Men who entered his life often had to move carefully. Cars could be parked away from the house. Visits could be timed. Public events often required women nearby to keep the image calm. A normal life had to be broken into pieces small enough to hide. This is what the public rarely understands about a hidden life. It is not one secret. It is thousands of small calculations. Who saw you? Who heard you? Who can be trusted? What did the neighbor think? What will the columnist print? What will the studio do? The fear becomes routine. And once fear becomes routine, it starts to feel like personality. People call you private, distant, careful. They do not always see that the caution was trained into you. Later, Lee Garlington, one of Hudson's partners, described the pressure of secrecy around their relationship. His memories are painful because they are so ordinary, not dramatic speeches, not movie scenes, just the everyday mechanics of hiding, the distance from the house, the fear of being seen, the understanding that he could not stand openly beside the man the whole country believed it knew. Rock Hudson could be desired by millions of people, but his real affection had to move like a problem. That is a specific kind of loneliness. It is not the loneliness of being unknown. It is the loneliness of being known incorrectly by everyone. Even friendship could become risky. A false rumor once spread that Hudson had secretly married Jim Neighbors. It was not true, but it was dangerous because it touched the one subject Hudson had been trained to fear. Reportedly, the rumor damaged their friendship because the risk felt too high. That is what the closet did. It made closeness expensive. It made innocent bonds look dangerous. It made a man step away from people not because he wanted to, but because the public lie demanded distance. Meanwhile, the audience kept buying the version Hollywood gave them. Pillow Talk, released in 1959, turned Hudson and Doris Day into one of the most beloved romantic pairings in American film. The movie was bright, clever, and safe. Hudson played a man who could flirt, deceive, charm, and finally soften into the right kind of partner. Doris Day gave the fantasy innocence. Hudson gave it size and heat without open threat. Together, they created a romantic world where everything looked playful and solvable. The audience loved it. That success made the hidden life even harder to disturb. Every hit told the studio the lie was working. Every fan letter proved the product had value. Every romantic comedy deepened the gap between the man on screen and the man off screen. The more lovable the public rock became, the more dangerous the private Roy became to the brand. That is the cruel arithmetic of stardom. The better the mask works, the harder it becomes to remove. Hudson was not only a mask. Friends described him as funny, kind, generous, insecure, and sometimes deeply sad. He could be warm in private and controlled in public. He could make people laugh. He could host. He could drink. He could give. He could also retreat into the habits of a man who had learned to expect danger from exposure. The public version flattened him into a dream. The private version was more human and more difficult. Hollywood did not want the difficult version. It wanted the clean shape. Over the years, drinking became part of the story. It was not the whole story, and it should not be used as a cheap label. But it was one way people close to him saw the pressure show itself. When a man spends decades hiding his real life from the public, the body keeps a record. The stress has to go somewhere. Sometimes it goes into alcohol, sometimes into distance, sometimes into bad choices, sometimes into silence so deep it becomes hard to tell where the performance ends. Then the 1980s arrived, and the private cost became impossible to contain. AIDS was moving through communities while much of America looked away. The disease was frightening, partly because people did not understand it well, but the fear was made worse by prejudice. Many early patients were gay men, and that allowed politicians, newspapers, churches, and ordinary citizens to treat the crisis as if it belonged to someone else. It was easier for the country to judge than to care. It was easier to whisper than to learn. People were getting sick, losing weight, disappearing from their own lives, and the public response was often slow, cold, and confused. Rock Hudson was diagnosed with AIDS in 1984. He did not tell the public. He told only a small circle. That secrecy was not created in one day. It was the result of a lifetime of training. Hide what can hurt the image, manage the story. Let only trusted people know, keep the public calm, protect the name. But a medical truth is not the same as a gossip rumor, treating it like one created harm. Hudson's live-in partner, Mark Christian, later said he was not told about the diagnosis. After Hudson's death, Christian sued the estate, claiming emotional distress and fear of exposure. He tested negative for HIV, but the lawsuit became a major public fight. It forced people to confront a difficult question. What happens when a life built on secrecy collides with a disease that requires honesty? There is no clean answer. Hudson had been harmed by a system that made truth dangerous. But he also made choices inside that system that affected another person. Both things can be true. A person can be shaped by cruelty and still create pain. That is what makes the story more serious than a simple victim narrative. The Hollywood closet was not only sad, it was dangerous. It trained people to hide even when hiding could hurt someone else. His appearance on Dynasty turned that danger into a national conversation. Hudson joined the show in a romantic storyline with Linda Evans. By then, he had already been diagnosed. The public did not know. The script included a kiss. Later accounts say he was deeply anxious about it. He reportedly used mouthwash and sprays before filming. The kiss looked restrained and awkward. Evans later said she believed he was trying to protect her. Today, we know HIV is not transmitted through casual closed-mouth kissing. At the time, public fear was so intense that many people did not understand that. That scene became famous for the wrong reason. The tabloids treated it like a possible threat. News reports asked irresponsible questions. People panicked. Linda Evans became part of a storm she had not chosen. But underneath the panic was a quieter truth. Hudson had been placed in a situation where refusing the scene could expose him, and doing the scene made him afraid. The old training had followed him onto a television set. The show had to continue. the fantasy still expected him to kiss the woman. The man inside the fantasy was already sick. In July of 1985, Hudson traveled to France seeking treatment. He had been looking into experimental options and specialist care. By then, his body had changed in a way no publicist could fully hide. Around that same period, he appeared publicly with Doris Day, and viewers were shocked by how thin and fragile he looked. The contrast was brutal. America remembered the large, steady man from the old films. The man in front of them looked ill, tired, and exposed. In Paris, he became seriously ill and was taken to the American hospital. At first, reports were confused. Some said liver cancer, others whispered AIDS. The press closed in quickly. The private wall that had stood for decades finally cracked in a foreign city, far from the studio system that had once controlled every angle. On July 25, 1985, his publicist, Janu Collard, confirmed that Rock Hudson had AIDS. The statement landed hard in the press. One of America's most famous leading men had the disease people had been taught to associate with strangers, outsiders, and people they did not want to think about. Now the face attached to AIDS was familiar. The man from Giant. The man from Pillow Talk. The man audiences had seen beside Elizabeth Taylor and Doris Day in different versions of Hollywood romance. The man who looked like the safest version of masculine Hollywood. That changed the public conversation. It did not end prejudice. It did not make the country compassionate overnight. But it made denial harder. People who had ignored AIDS suddenly had to say the word at dinner tables. News anchors had to explain it. Magazines had to cover it. Fans had to process it. If Rock Hudson could have AIDS, then the disease could no longer be kept outside the American imagination. The political response still carried the coldness of the era. Hudson had known Ronald and Nancy Reagan for years. During the crisis in France, his representatives sought help getting him transferred to a French military hospital. Records and later reporting show the White House did not intervene the way his team wanted. Reagan did call Hudson privately, and public sympathy came later, but the larger record of silence around AIDS had already become impossible to ignore. For years, the administration had been slow to speak directly and seriously about the epidemic, while thousands were suffering. Hudson's illness made that silence more visible. The point is not that one phone call could have solved the crisis. It could not. The point is what the moment revealed. A man who had spent decades protecting a conservative screen fantasy found himself caught in a public health emergency that powerful people were still hesitant to confront. The image had been useful. The sick man was harder to handle. Getting home became its own ordeal. Hudson returned to California by private charter. The details have been told in different ways, but the meaning is clear. Fear surrounded AIDS so heavily that even transport became complicated. Money could arrange a flight. Money could not remove the stigma. The leading man, who had once traveled through the world as a symbol of ease, was now moving under pressure, watched by press, surrounded by rumor, and running out of strength. Back in Los Angeles, the final months stripped away what remained of the old mask. The public knew. The press waited. Some friends came close. Others kept distance. Fear was everywhere, but so was love from unexpected places. Letters arrived. Fans wrote with concern. People who had never met him suddenly understood that the disease had a human face. The man Hollywood had hidden became visible in a way the studio could no longer manage. Elizabeth Taylor did not turn away. She had known Hudson as a friend, not only as a screen image. She visited him and spoke about him with care. His illness helped push her into AIDS activism with a force that changed public fundraising. She became one of the strongest celebrity voices in the fight, helping support major research and awareness efforts, including work connected to AMFAR. Taylor used fame differently from the studios. They had used visibility to sell a false comfort. She used visibility to demand attention for people who were being ignored. That reversal is one of the most important parts of the story. The same celebrity machine that had helped hide Rock Hudson's truth became, through his illness and Taylor's response, a tool for public pressure. The image that once trapped him helped open wallets, headlines, and conversations. It came too late to give him back the years he spent hiding, but it mattered for others. Hudson also donated money to AIDS research before he died. His public diagnosis helped increase attention and funding in a way quiet suffering had not. He did not become an activist through years of speeches and marches. His body was too tired, and his life had been too controlled. But his public illness became a turning point because people knew his face. The manufactured star image finally served something beyond ticket sales. Rock Hudson died on October 2nd, 1985. He was 59 years old. The official cause was complications related to AIDS. The man was gone, but the old films kept showing him as if nothing had happened. On screen, he could still stand tall, smile easily, and make the old fantasy work. Off-screen, the cost of that fantasy had already been paid. After his death, the legal battle with Mark Christian brought the private damage into public record. Christian said he had suffered severe emotional distress because Hudson had not disclosed the diagnosis. He remained HIV negative, but the court awarded him a large judgment. The case became part of a broader national discussion about responsibility, disclosure, privacy, and fear during the AIDS crisis. It was not clean. It was not simple. It showed how a public lie can keep creating damage even after the person at the center of it is gone. The court case also made people look again at the old Hollywood closet. For decades, secrecy had been treated as protection. But protection for whom? It protected studios from lost profits. It protected publicists from hard questions. It protected fans from having to rethink the fantasy. It protected the brand. It did not protect the person. And when AIDS arrived, that old habit of secrecy became more than emotionally painful. It became medically and legally dangerous. This is why Rock Hudson's story cannot be told only as a story about one man hiding. That is too small. He was not hiding in an empty room. He was hiding inside a system built by studios, agents, gossip magazines, fan culture, law, politics, and public prejudice. Every piece of that system told him the same thing: the truth is too expensive. So he learned to survive by dividing himself. Roy Fitzgerald stayed private. Rock Hudson went to work. Rock Hudson kissed women on screen. Roy Fitzgerald loved men in guarded rooms. Rock Hudson belonged to the audience. Roy Fitzgerald had to ask who could be trusted. That split made money. That is the part that should not be softened. The split was profitable. The studio could sell him as romantic proof of heterosexual safety. Magazines could print his face. Fans could imagine him as husband material. Publicists could build stories around dates and marriage. Everyone got something from the mask except the man who had to wear it every day. Women were also used by that machine. Phyllis Gates became part of the public answer to rumors. Actresses could be placed beside Hudson at events to make the photographs look right. Female co-stars helped sell the fantasy even when they did not know the full cost behind it. The system understood the visual language. A woman on a man's arm could calm suspicion faster than a denial. A wedding ring could do what no press statement could. A romantic comedy could wash away whispers for another season. That did not make the women villains. It made them part of the machinery, sometimes knowingly, sometimes not. Old Hollywood had a habit of turning women into proof of a man's normalcy. Their lives, reputations, and emotions could be used to hold up a public story. Phyllis Gates was not just a footnote. She was one of the people hurt by a system that needed her image to protect his. The audience helped too, though many did not know it. That is the uncomfortable part. Studios built masks because they believed the public wanted masks. They believed moviegoers wanted clean men, clean women, clean endings, and clean desire. They believed the truth would ruin the product. And because audiences kept buying the product, the studios kept saying they were right. But the relationship worked both ways. The public rewarded the lie, and the studios trained the public to need it. Every polished romantic poster taught people what kind of man was acceptable. Every fan magazine story pointed desire in the approved direction. Every hidden relationship made the official fantasy look more natural. The market shaped the lie, and the lie shaped the market. That is how a system survives. Nobody has to carry the whole blame alone. The agent says he is protecting the client. The studio says it is protecting the film. The columnist says readers want the truth. The audience says it only wanted entertainment. The politician says the timing is difficult. Each person claims a small excuse. Put together, those excuses become a cage. There was one film that now feels like a message from inside that cage. Seconds, released in 1966, gave Hudson one of his strangest roles. He played a man placed into a new identity, a man who accepts a manufactured life and then discovers that the new face does not bring freedom. The film was cold, uneasy, and nothing like the light romantic image many viewers expected from him. It did not comfort the audience. It disturbed them. Looking back, it is hard not to see why the role cuts so deeply. A man rebuilt by others. A life designed on paper. A public face that hides panic. A body that belongs to a system. Seconds was not a confession in the literal sense, but it feels close to the emotional truth of his life. The audience had been trained to want Rock Hudson smiling. It did not want to watch him trapped in a manufactured identity. So the film was easier to reject than to understand. The public wanted the product. It was less ready for the person. That is the wound at the center of the Rock Hudson story. Privacy itself was not the problem. Every person has a right to private life. The problem was that Hollywood turned privacy into imprisonment. It did not allow him to choose what to reveal. It made truth a threat to employment, income, reputation, and safety. It taught him that honesty could destroy everything. Then, when illness arrived, the same training followed him into the most dangerous moment of his life. What Hollywood protected was not always the person. More often, it protected the product, the profit, and the illusion the public had paid to believe. Hollywood sold him as the safe leading man, handsome, available, and easy to believe in. The audience thought it knew him because it knew the face. But a face on screen is not a person. A studio biography is not a life. A wedding photograph is not proof of happiness. A kiss in a romantic comedy is not the whole truth. Roy Fitzgerald lived behind the parts the public was allowed to see. The hardest part is that the mask worked. It worked for decades. It made money. It made him famous. It made him beloved. It gave him houses, status, invitations, and power of a certain kind. But it also trained him to live against himself. It made love dangerous. It made truth expensive. It made fear practical. It made loneliness look like professionalism. That is why the story still matters. It is not only about the 1950s. Modern entertainment likes to believe it has outgrown this kind of control. In some ways, it has. Public language has changed. Some performers can live openly now in ways Hudson could not. Some audiences are more accepting. Some studios understand that secrecy can no longer be managed the same way. But the machine did not disappear. It changed its tools. A studio contract can become a brand deal. A gossip column can become a viral post. A publicity marriage can become a relationship launch. A controlled fan magazine can become a controlled social feed. A closet can become a silence everyone agrees not to name because the image is still too profitable. The pressure does not always look like old Hollywood anymore. Sometimes it looks like strategy. Sometimes it looks like privacy. Sometimes it looks like a publicist saying, "Not yet." The old question remains. When a performer becomes profitable, who protects the person from the product? Who decides which truth is too risky? Who gets asked to wait, hide, soften, deny, or smile until the release date passes? Who benefits when the audience is sold a version of someone that the person cannot actually live inside? Rock Hudson gave Hollywood decades of value. Universal got the leading man. The public got the fantasy. The tabloids got leverage. Agents got power. Politicians got photo opportunities when he was healthy, and distance when he became difficult. Activists got a turning point only after his body could no longer carry the silence. And Roy Fitzgerald got a life split between what he was and what the world demanded he appear to be. So when the old films play again, the question should not be whether Rock Hudson had charm. He did. It should not be whether he was a star. He was. It should not be whether audiences truly loved him. Many did. The question is, what kind of love requires a man to hide himself in order to receive it? Who made that bargain? Who profited from it? Who kept selling the mask after they knew the man underneath was paying for it? Who decided the real Rock Hudson was too dangerous for the audience, while the fake one was safe enough to print on every poster? This is not just about a star who kept a secret. It is about an industry that turned secrecy into a business plan, and a public that bought comfort without asking what it cost. Rock Hudson became one of the most recognizable faces in the world while being told that his real life had to stay off screen. The studio version wants him frozen in the bright old frame, tall, handsome, smiling, clean. The real story is harder. A young man came to Hollywood looking for a chance. The industry gave him a name, a voice, a body language, a public romance, and a set of rules. It gave him fame, but not freedom. It gave him admiration, but not honesty. It gave him everything a star was supposed to want, then made sure the person inside the star could not fully exist. That is the cost hidden inside the old photographs. Rock Hudson's final chapter forced the world to look at what it had helped ignore. AIDS had been treated as someone else's crisis until his face made that lie harder to keep. His illness did not redeem the system that hid him. It exposed it. It showed how a culture could adore an image and abandon the people who did not fit that image. It showed how silence can be sold as dignity while functioning like a locked door. It showed how a man can be loved by millions and still be left alone with the truth. The films remain. The smile remains. The name remains. But now, if you watch closely, the image carries a second story. Behind the clean leading man was a private human being trying to survive a role that never ended when the director called cut. You are watching Hollywood Dark Secrets. If you want to understand how this system truly operates, subscribe to the channel. We are building a ledger they cannot erase, and we need you watching closely because the studio story was never the whole story.